the minutes.
Recording in progress.
Okay, thank you. So, um, I'll entertain a motion to approve today's agenda, and the meetings, remember, are AI and available.
My motion.
Was that you, Mikey?
That was Mark. I motion.
Okay.
Mike for twice.
Okay, Mark. And then, I don't believe we have Miss Amy with us. I will text Miss Amy, but I spoke with her, last week, and she was in the middle of filing our taxes. And we were solvent, and there had been no changes since our last update. Because she was asking me for any receipts, etc., so she could file our taxes.
Right.
So, the meeting dates that we're having some changes due to holidays, etc., but we still need to meet and plan. So December 14th will be our next meeting. Mr. Mark, what's the name of that restaurant that we were going to meet at for our annual meeting?
It's called Frankie's.
Frankie's. Okay, do you have a problem with us meeting virtually and in person at your place in December on the 14th?
At Frankie's?
No, at your place of business.
Oh no, we could meet at Plano.
Okay, so December 14th will be Zoom and in person in Plano. And
Are we gonna meet and are we gonna go out and eat dinner after that, or is that in January?
that's in January. We will
Okay.
meet and have dinner
Yeah.
at
Frankie's.
Frankie's. I keep wanting to call it Ricardo's for some reason.
I did talk to Frankie, by the way, and he said just let him know a couple weeks ahead of time.
Okay.
Now, when are we doing this in January again? Is it the 18th?
January 19th.
19th, perfect. Okay, I'll be back from Japan then. So I'll coordinate with him before I go to Japan, I guess.
And that's in Richardson, correct?
That's in Richardson.
And thank you so much for your assistance.
Mhm.
So on December 14th, we're going to meet Zoom virtually and in person in Plano. What's the name of that center that you work at?
It's the Oak Point Recreation Center.
Beautiful place.
Actually, Oak Point Nature Preserve. And while we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead
Nice
and
place too.
so December 14th, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go ahead and reserve that right now.
Because I think we need to meet in person more often.
I agree.
All right, now on this bilingual workshop, we have a meeting set up with Mr. Sills, Mark, myself, Mark Croce. Is that how you say his last name, Mr. Sills? He may not be with us. But anyway, we'll go down this, and we have some things already settled, like committee personnel are Amy, Mark, Mike, and myself. And the date is February 20th. And the location is the Texas Agri-Life Center.
Correct.
And we're going to call it the North Texas Pruning and Safety Workshop.
I like it.
And remember that this is going to be more safety and pruning related, more field related as compared to what we do when we go to the state conference, which will be really more municipal.
Susan, I've been recruiting for that event. I went to the Arbor Day for Dallas Community College with Michael on Tuesday to represent TBUFC.
Hallelujah.
And I spoke to the maintenance director. They have 5 campuses and they're very interested in attending the workshop.
They have to get, they have to have so many CEUs.
Mhm.
And they have gone to the North Central Texas workshop to get those in the past. I didn't see them there last year, but it could be because of the mix up. But I'm sure that'll be a great group to get in. Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
And then we'll get the agenda. The registration will be done through ISA Texas. And then we need volunteers. So anybody that wants to volunteer, let me know. And
I'm
that,
in,
who was that?
Mark.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, Mark, you're on the committee. You're already in like Jen. But volunteers and sponsors. Chris Resmundson texted me this morning and he talked to Amy at the TCIA conference, and he is working on sponsors hot and heavy. So we've got that in the works. But if anybody has relationships with sponsors, we need them. We want them to set up, but we also need raffle prizes. And then lunch is provided by Rainbow. I'll do some speaker gifts after we know who the speakers are. I don't know who they are, but they're on the agenda. The agenda's already fixed. So we just need that agenda.
Hmm.
And Mark and Mike are handling travel arrangements. Correct? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Mike and I will coordinate with Mark Crucy to speak to the speakers.
And please, the next one, item 6 on the agenda says meeting with Mark Forrest. Amy thought his last name was Forrest. His last name is Croze, Kroze. So if we can make that change, because he is the regional forester for San Antonio with the
Yeah.
Texas Forest Service, and she just got forester mixed up with his last name.
Yeah, that's a correction on his name. It's Kroeze. Crow Easy.
E.
Crow Easy.
Croze. Thank you, Mike.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we'll go into the shade keeper training. We held our first training and we had 9 people in class. And then on the infield session, we had 8 people and 3 park personnel. Because when we did our pruning, we were doing some structural pruning that was going to take some cuts in a couple of years. And so we wanted park personnel to be there so that they could know what needed to be done. They also went through the training, and their Amanda Morin, who works with Keep Grand Prairie Beautiful, has spoken with the Parks Department about pruning in their parks, putting a group together because we have interested people who want to work in Grand Prairie and in the parks to help them prune. But she can't administer the program. She has too much going on. And so we would have to rely on Parks Department to administer the program, tell us where we need to go and equipment and personnel, etc. So we will have to
Is that going to be a weekday
go to the
thing
city
or
of
a
Grand
week?
Prairie and ask them if we can play in the parks, and we'll have to put the system together and work with them. So it'll have to go through us instead of through Keep Grand Prairie Beautiful.
Susan, who's wanting the training again?
The Amanda Morin is with Keep Grand Prairie Beautiful.
Okay.
We already have some trained people who want to work in Grand Prairie and want
Yeah.
to prune in the parks.
Okay.
So in order to administer that program, we'll have to work with the Parks Department. And so since I worked there for a long time, I have no problem with setting that up.
Is that going to be a weekend thing or a weekday thing?
It would be it's depending on them. You know, it
I mean,
would
if it's a
probably be
weekday,
more than
I'm more likely to
likely,
be able to make a weekday than weekend.
it would be more likely weekends because these people
Yeah.
work.
Okay. And it sounds like it's going to be young trees, like small trees.
Yes, but there will be some root pruning, there'll be some inventory, there's all kinds of things that need to be done.
Okay. Um, uh, Before you move on to the next subject, like before you go to Sibling Branches, let me know. I got something to add.
Okay, well, in addition, the next training will be at the Gateway Church on Carrier Parkway and on February 3rd, and we're going to do fruit tree pruning. And I went by there and looked at it, and there are some peaches and pears, but they have been, unlike what we did at Kirby Creek, these have been pruned. Now, the pears are a mess. They're going to take some time, but the peaches and plums have been fairly well pruned by a gentleman that was working there for years as a volunteer, and he's since passed away. So they haven't been pruned in a couple of years, and we're going to take that over and help them out on February 3rd. And then as we progress to other cities with this training, as we do in Grand Prairie, we're tailoring it to what they need. We will tailor our program to each city as we go individually. So what you need in Plano, Mark, as volunteers may be totally different from what they
Yeah.
need in Grand Prairie. So
Yeah.
that's the
So
beauty of this system, is we can tailor it to each community.
yeah, so this Sonia Ford, right?
Yes, ma'am, sir.
So her and the same gentleman that is interested in the English Spanish training, they need help doing a tree inventory for all 5 campuses.
Okay.
So I thought maybe I told him I bring it up to our meeting. Maybe that's a specific need like you're talking about, where
Right.
maybe we could train some people.
Who
Their campuses
specifically-
are all over though. Okay, so there's Brookhaven and Addison. There's one in Richardson. There's one in Mesquite. I think there's one in where were we on? I forgot where we were on Tuesday, but they're kind of all over. I don't know how that would work. I don't know if we have the
We just have to
capability.
start out and meet with Sonia, find out what their exact needs are, and then how we can fit into that and how we can assist them.
Are there any kind of grants and stuff that would fall into that category?
As long as right now, the only grants that would be available would be for underserved communities. I don't
Okay.
know how else to put it. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Economically depressed areas is what, because they've found that trees increase property values, they build community, they cut down on crime, they help with health, etc., etc. Now that we have the facts, people want to play.
I have a question. Karen has her people, right?
Yes,
They're trained to do tree inventories, I believe.
they want to
Already.
play too, is what I've heard. So we just need to approach Karen.
That's what I was wondering is, do we want to train our own people, our own shade keepers, or do we want to reach out to Karen's
We
group
should
and see
reach
if they
out
want
because they used to join us on these meetings.
to? Okay.
So Karen Woodard
Uh-huh.
is whom we would reach out to.
I know who she is.
And we would want to copy Chris McMasters because
Okay.
he's been assisting her, and I think he's the one who's going to take over that program, and he's asked us to assist him with that anyway.
Okay. I'm sure they're busy enough with the city of Dallas, but
So we need a meeting with them, and then we need a meeting with Sonia.
yeah.
And I'll set up some meetings.
As
Okay.
far as, can I
It's
make? a
good. People are
comment on
coming to
that?
us telling us what their needs are, and so we're here
We
to
need
help
to fit
them.
them. Let's help them.
Let's
Can I
help them.
comment on the grants?
What's that, Mike?
I'd like to make a comment about the grants.
Yeah, please.
So that information has come out, I believe. Michael, did I sent that to you to put on our website, right? Anyway, we got information. And when I get the information, I pass it on over to Michael to put on our portal and our website. But it is there is a portion of that that's underserved communities, but it's not the whole thing. I mean, there's money out there,
That's what I was thinking.
grants out there. As far as Sonia's case, the grants is usually it's directed to communities. So, but it would be, in Sonia's best interest to connect with the city of Lancaster or whatever city that campus is in, and collaborate and to get the grant that way. I've already had someone within the professional community bring it to my attention that, hey, where are the grants for the professional arborist? And again, there is money out there for the professional arborist is in the form of grants. They would want to collaborate with the community and apply for it that way.
So you're saying going through the city?
Yes, sir. Yeah, these grants are community oriented, but it doesn't mean that it blocks everybody out. That's just like they're going through a nonprofit to get the money. They're going through the city. It's just a pathway. It's not meant to just alienate folks. It's just a pathway, and all one would have to do, in my opinion, is just make communication with those folks. We'll let them know that they're out there wanting to assist, or be the contractor that does work, whatever, however they want to approach it. But the funds are out there, and they are should be visible in our Texas Forest Information Portal under funding connector.
Mike, I've run into issues working with nonprofits in the city of Plano because our relationship with our park foundation, Plano's Park Foundation, is not good. Could TBUFC help with the grants as far as like applying for the grants and then be that middleman?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, yes.
Because I think that's easier for cities. I think because cities don't want to take money. They have to deflect it to a nonprofit, right?
I think so. So, yeah, I mean,
excuse me, but
yeah,
some grants are not available except to a 501c3, and cities are not a 501c3.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They have to be funneled through a nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot as far as funding goes, Mike. I wasn't aware of any funding for the private sector. I thought most funding was available just for like community oriented projects. What would they fund for a private company?
Well, I was mentioning that they would have to have that conversation with a city, and and put out a
so they couldn't
grant proposal.
The funding directly. They would have to go through a city and assist them in a project.
I mean, what are they going to work on? They're not going to. I mean, this is two branches, and I don't mean to be long-winded about this, but there's in this particular instance, the guy I was talking to would have to approach a city and assist on a city, something on city land, like a city project. And there's no reason they couldn't assist with that. the other thing is, year before last, you had a mill, an urban mill, and he was right out there, and they had a whole hour about it. He was on a round table where he received a $250,000 grant to fund his operation, and so the money is there.
Right, it's how you write it up and how you approach it. So
Exactly.
we can assist, but as
Exactly.
we pointed out before, it's going to be an individual case by case basis. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we just have to meet the people and find out what they need.
Well,
Susan,
and-
we need to probably have maybe a separate committee for the grants that are coming out from the Texas A&M Forest Service.
Yes.
I mean, I'm looking at it right now and I'm like, how cool would it be if TBUFC was the one that helped get the municipal forestry grant? There's one for $100,000, and we were able to get a city in Mike's area, a forester, maybe for, a smaller city for 2 or 3 years. I mean, that would be pretty cool.
Yes. And committee for grants. Would you like to chair that?
Yeah.
And I'll assist as you'd like.
And Mike should be on there.
Well, of course.
Sorry, Mike, I'm throwing you on the bus, man. Mike Sills.
That's fine. I'm just saying,
Yeah, go ahead.
what I'm trying to get across here is all this stuff is transparent and anybody can access it.
Yeah.
I'm in the funding connector now,
Yeah.
and
You got
you put in
connection.
the county, and I've got 1 of 7 hits. There's a prescribed fire grant. There is an open space conservation program grant for that. There's
Yeah, I'm interested in the fire
let's
grant.
see, community forestry grant program. There's a
Okay.
community, this right here, it talks
Yeah,
about
there's a
the community forestry grant.
$100,000 community forester grant.
Okay, that's
Well,
great. Hey, guys,
I'm-
that is great. And as a committee, let's set up a meeting and
Yeah,
let's
we'll talk
do
about it.
next week. Okay, next week or two before Christmas.
Well, the application for those grants opens December 11th.
Okay,
So we should probably meet sometime next week.
okay. Can you set that up, Mark?
Yeah, I can set that up.
Okay.
Who's coming? It's gonna be just me, Mike, and you, Susan? And Michael? Levy,
So
do you wanna
far,
be-
unless we want to have that gentleman that spoke with you join us, Mike.
yeah, I'll let him know. Just send me the invite and I'll pass it on to Scott.
All right, before we move on from
Yeah,
that,
sure.
I'm just gonna, because I need to, I'm gonna do this on my calendar now because it's easier. How's next Thursday for everybody? We did Thursday at noon. Would that work?
I'm checking. Yes, sir. On the 7th.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah,
Okay. I'll
All
set up
right.
another meeting. Okay, you can keep going.
The shade keeper, we did that. We're saluting branches. I never have really gotten an update from Amy on the attendance. I mean, do we know approximately how many people were there?
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. I was writing in the thing. Say
How
that
many
again.
people attended saluting branches? How many people? participated?
There were about 20 cadets, and I'd say about 30 workers between public works and the forestry, at least. So I'd say in total 60 people,
Okay.
and that's a little conservative.
Okay. And I guess 2024 is still in the planning stage.
hmm
Oh, Chris, Mr. Owen, just to let you know, Saluting Branches is a program that's been going on for 5 or 6 years where arborists across the nation prune trees in veteran ceremonies on the same day and for free. And we do a couple of cemeteries in Dallas well, the DFW cemetery and then a cemetery in Dallas Parks Department, and we provide lunch. Everybody brings their tools and equipment, and we just prune and have a great time.
Yeah, sounds like a great program.
It's done across the
Awesome.
nation.
It's a great program.
How,
Yeah.
how many meals did we get charged for on that day?
Well, we have a base amount that they charge us, Mike,
Oh,
if we
okay.
exceed that, then there's a cost. So, it works out to about,
Well, I'm
20
just saying that's if we knew the number, we could have gotten our number of
Oh,
people.
yeah.
from that.
Well, I can tell you that number's not accurate because at least half the kids went back and got seconds.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
thought there was 70 people out there. I thought it was hanging around the number we always had.
70? Yeah, it's probably closer to 70. I was being conservative. So
That's great, because when we do when we do our yearly meeting at our membership meeting, we want to tell everybody all the things that we've done this year.
yeah.
Okay. Web update, Michael can't talk.
You can
So,
skip it this
wait,
week.
wait, let's back up. I missed EAB. Additional assistance in urban forestry for the city of Dallas. We don't have any money with the city of Dallas here, so we're gonna skip that on the agenda. And then the web update, Michael,
Give
can't,
it to us next in 2 weeks.
huh?
You can
Oh,
give it to us in 2 weeks.
He could talk to us then. Now, social media, we need a volunteer that will post for
Yeah.
us, that can assist us on, posting the social media stuff to our website, to Twitter, to Facebook. The accounts are set up, but we need
Yeah.
to have someone that will administer the program.
Well, I think that we should nominate one of the board members to do that. I'm on enough committees as it is, and I'll be honest, I don't like social media, but I doesn't mean I can't do it. But I think someone who has not been doing as much as some of the others, I think should do it. I don't know how y'all
Okay.
feel about that.
Well, what we'll do is we'll have to contact them. We can't just and ask.
Yeah, we can ask, but I need to look at the list of everyone that's on the list, and then
Well, I'm also gonna
if you're going to
contact.
be on the board, you
Yeah.
need to contribute in some kind of way.
Well, yeah, and that's what the bylaws say. If you're on the board, you sit on a committee, you attend the meetings, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So we'll look for me, and then the urban forestry management planning. Do we have any update on that, Mr.
Yeah,
Mike?
so the update is, I think we're going to wait till April. I was talking to Mike about this. We already have a list of topics that we're going to talk about.
Okay,
I'm going to be in Japan for between December 26th and January 14th. So doing something in January or February was not going to be easy. So I think that if we want to bring in a speaker, that we need more time, and we don't want to overshadow the February
oh, no.
Spanish training. So I think April's a good time. What's the other nonprofit? I can never remember. Cross Timber.
And
When is their event?
theirs is I think the 22nd. It's right in that area. We're
Is
not.
it in April?
Huh? No, in February.
Oh, perfect. So if we did something in April, we've already had the topics. We already know we can do it in-house. The question is, hey, do we want to bring in somebody from the outside? And I think this one is going to be a shorter. It's not going to be an all-day event. It's going to be closer to a 4 to 5 hour event. And we're just pushing it back.
Okay, well, that works. Just set up a committee meeting and, as soon as you get back or whenever you want to do that, Mark.
Yeah,
we'll get
yeah. I
that.
mean, we've already got the topics laid out. We already know what we want to talk about. We've got people that want to talk about stuff. So
Okay.
most of the work's done. It's just the timing that needs to be done.
Mac Martin wanted to be involved. You might want to, because he was very interested and wanted to be involved. So just FYI.
I think Grant is part of our next workshop, so he was going to be involved already.
Cool. All right, so Speakers Bureau, we need to get that information up on our website, Mike, as soon as possible. So let's go to lunch soon and let's get that set up so we can at least get the information up on our website.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Mr. Hauser's not with us for the Texas Tree Trails update, but in addition, he has that Comanche low water crossing tree inventory that he's trying to work on. And that's going to involve everything from historical research to on-site stuff. And it could eventually probably lead into a good tree tour. And Steve was a little concerned that they're not all local. Well, we did a tree tour with Cross Timbers and we were gone for 3 days.
Wow.
And you can stay in state parks and we can go look at these trees and, you know, do some research on them too. So we'll want to
Okay.
keep that in mind. And then
Is that for the Texas Tree Council?
the next one, number 15,
Yeah.
that's not supposed to be, you're our TBUFC representative for the Texas Urban Forestry Council, TUFC. Okay, and
Mike and I talked
they're
about
only
that
gonna-
too.
They
on
only meet
Tuesday.
once a year now, Mark.
Yeah.
And
Maybe a couple of us can go down there.
yeah, and Mac Martin is your contact for that.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
and let's see. Then we have long-term and continued planning, and I guess, Mr. Sills, you see these people all the time, don't you? Or occasionally you speak with them or are in contact with them.
What you talking about?
Number 16 on the agenda, it says
You gotta say Willis after that.
long-term and continued planning.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
Irving and Dallas and Highland Park and Heritage Ranch and Waxahachie, Plano, Corsicana, Terrell, Dallas County Community College. So
yes,
you
yes.
and you're telling them we're still gonna have the workshop, etc.
Yeah, so yeah, whenever I am with them, I talk up TBUFC and our workshops. I can't say too much about this, but I will say that there are 2 cities on this list that are prime for grants. So
That's what I like to hear.
I'll just leave it at that. And until I talk to Mac. But
That's cool.
Mike,
Yeah,
let's be
so,
the
I
let's
mean-
be the ones that help them get it.
exactly. I think we're in a prime spot. I think the iron is red hot. I think the time, I was talking to Mark about this, the time to strike is now. I think
Yeah.
that, you know, we can really ramp up what we're doing and you know, get the word out about the council, get to doing things that will bring in revenue and just bolster our efforts. Just a side note on this, that I was talking to Mark, they're asking me to sell our program, the urban forestry program, specifically, I guess, TFS, to our director and associate director, that's Al Davis and Bill Oates. And I'm terrible at tooting my own horn. I really don't like to, because I just want to help folks. And I think that and the council is just so closely tied to my job, that I was asking Mark, brought it up, that, you know, I think along the lines of the media, getting someone for the media thing to send out little blurbs about what we are doing and what I'm doing type of thing, what we're doing together, regularly. And on that note, I wanted to see, this is kind of a Michael Levy, area. Send Al Davis and Bill Oates an invitation to, be on our portal, be a member, and even attend our meetings. And so that's that one.
I can reach
And-
out to them, Mike, as president, if you can
And
give
then-
me the names again.
Perfect. And
Bill Oates.
yeah, Bill Oates and Al Davis. And then also some leftover business. I don't know that Stephen Sloan that did the woodworking, they at that last conference, they paid the man, but then we also promised a membership to our group. And I was wondering if maybe we can send that out to Stephen Sloan. I've got his email address. It's Stephen.Sloan, Stephen STEPHEN.SLOAN at rocketmail.com. Send him a membership because we promised him one.
Could you text me that address or email me that address,
Yeah,
Michael?
I'll tell, yes.
Do we need a vote on that, or do we already promised it and we're just doing it?
We already promised it. We will just follow through.
I'm for it, so.
And as a board, we know we can approve anything under $600.
Okay,
That's a
$600.
$20 membership. I think we can buy it.
Thank you.
Well, I just think in general that when we do these workshops, I think we should include membership in all of our workshops.
Oh, yes, we did that forever.
Yeah, we should always be doing that and getting people to come out, so. And eventually, a quarterly, kind of a quarterly, what do you call that stupid thing? Newsletter.
Yes. Right. And once
Right.
again, that would be just, we need somebody that can do it. You and I can't do everything, Mark.
I don't know, we need more, well, I
So,
know we normally have more people here. It's just in the
I know,
holidays.
well, it's the holidays. We knew that November and December would be
Yeah.
sparse, but that's okay. We're gonna keep going. We've got too
That's
much to do, too much planning to do. We got a lot done today. I'm excited with all we have going on.
And Susan,
Right.
I'm gonna, as far as the workshops go, I'm gonna look into other workshops that people are doing in Texas. I know Mike,
Well-
we kind of talked about this. If we can find workshops that are happening in
Right,
other
we
cities.
have a workshop in progress with Christopher Rasmussen that would be webinar safety training that we can charge.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Okay,
And
well,
that
we'll
would
talk
be-
about that later, but I think that if we can piggyback like we're doing with Mark Cruzy, where they're going to San Antonio, then they're coming to Dallas, like, and if we set something up and do something and we could help Mark out too, and if we can kind of set them up to where they're visiting multiple cities at the same time, I think that would be great.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That, and it's just, it's easier on everyone involved.
Yeah.
So,
And I'd be
great.
willing, if we did our workshop and I was speaking and it was all of us speaking, I would expect everybody to, hopefully be able to go down to San Antonio or wherever to do a second workshop. I think it's fair.
Exactly. Okay. This has been a great meeting. Our next meeting is gonna be November 14th. And it's gonna be Zoom and in person.
Yeah, in person. Let's go.
I'm excited. It'd be nice to see everybody again. Is there any other comments or anything that anyone would like to add?
Roundtable time.
Hey, no, I appreciate y'all allowing me to join in on the meeting. I'm excited to get more involved. If y'all, I heard some volunteer opportunities that y'all were talking about. I'm happy to help out whichever way I can, even if it's like social media or something. I have some experience doing that, so I just want to throw that out there.
No, man, you two are hooking up, you and Michael.
Yeah, but seriously, yeah, I'm definitely, happy to help in any way I can.
All
Chris,
right,
what do you do, Chris?
I actually currently work in finance, a TIAA. I'm just a customer service rep. I'm
Yeah.
actually looking to branch out into a different industry.
You
And
trying to get outside?
yeah, I am. Yeah,
Well,
I've been,
network around, that's what we're doing.
That's why
Yeah.
we're in this business, man, because we like working outside.
And
absolutely.
you'll be surprised how many different contacts you will make through this organization. So just hang in there with us. We're blowing and going now.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
Yep.
you're
I mean,
one.
look, I used to work with Texas Trees Foundation, and they have a job opening right now for like this green team crew leader. I think it pays like 55 to 60. So, there's opportunity out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's always a job board.
Uh,
At,
Te- Texas Forest Service has some openings. We've got a urban forestry opening in Victoria, and we got one in McGregor.
There you go.
Like I've been meaning to ask y'all, and I think this would be a perfect time to ask, but for someone like me who has like, I don't have any experience in like forestry or anything, because I'm coming from finance, and when you look at my resume, it's all finance stuff, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to be more involved in organizations like this, so I can, just have that on my resume. So
right. Well,
yeah,
we will take the assistance and we will use you and abuse you. Because we like you.
And Mike can help you with, you need if you wanted to get into like ISA certification and get to that point, we can help you with that. We've got, I've got the books that I can let you borrow. We've all got books. You don't need to buy it. There's a class that's really good to go to that Mike knows about, that guy that's teaching that class. And then, we can kind of just guide you on what you need to do. You need a certain amount of, I think, a green experience before you can apply. So
Yeah.
by just working with us and being here and like coming out and volunteering, you're getting that experience. So
In the training.
Yeah.
The training.
Chris,
Absolutely.
Chris.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you the help right now. I'm not gonna make you wait, but I would suggest, if money and time wasn't an issue, getting a forestry degree from Stephen F. Austin State University, and then if that was then second to that would be becoming an ISA certified arborist. The reason I say that, and just just getting into the educate, or just the whole industry, just submersing yourself in it, and learning, and in our group TBUFC, you can glean information, education from any one of the folks there. And but the reason I say the top tier, trying to get a degree in, I say forestry. Second to that would be urban forestry, but forestry, because we are experiencing some issues with some folks in the industry that I'm getting a lot of feedback from folks that are working for cities, and they're telling the city something, that they can do things, and come to find out they really can't. They're overstepping private property rights, which is a big deal here in this state. Other states, they can trample on people's property rights all they want, but
like Austin.
they and so they're just kind of doing some things that really cause a lot of problems downstream. And my advice is, that you don't want to be that guy. And
Right.
Or gal. And so that's, you want to make sure that you are really grounded,
There's
and
other things that you can do
well-rounded
in this industry too, besides just forestry. I mean, there's all kinds of AI stuff. Now they're doing, Mr. Boating just did a LiDAR inventory of his whole city, didn't you?
No, not LiDAR. That was the guy in Denton.
Yeah, it was a guy in Denton.
What's
But
his name?
the whole point is there's all kinds of opportunities in this profession. And sure, we can find something that'll fit you. And
Chris,
yeah,
I started out as computer science and then I went to soil science and now I'm in trees. So I don't have a degree in trees and I'm in the business.
All I'm saying is whichever route you go, you want to make sure you're well grounded in it and that you get in there and you have some sound. some
amen.
Sound
And we
advice.
can help you.
Hey
Yep.
guys,
Yeah, I'm
I'll
excited.
show you some, before we leave, before we adjourn, I wanted to show you some stuff I got for giveaways at our annual meeting.
Yeah. It's
Did you
blurry.
see this?
No, because you're black. Oh, there it is. Oh, that's cool.
So you
What is
grow
that?
a crystal tree. Okay. Or another thing is you can have the world's smallest Lincoln logs.
No, I like that too.
And this makes a whole house. There's 41 pieces in here. This is just rude. You know,
Yeah,
but it'll be fun.
I like that one.
And then this ring light that
Oh,
can
cool.
go on your phone or your computer, so you can do selfies or have
Yeah.
better.
And hey, Susan, don't forget, like I'm bringing the 400-year-old bur oak tree fell down. So I'm going to get some pieces of that and lacquer them up for the giveaway.
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure. So any of those little things like that you see that's tree related, let's pick them up for our membership meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Without further ado, if no one has anything else to add, we will meet you on November 14th in person or in Plano, not Richardson,
Yep. December 14th.
December 14th at 12 p.m.
Perfect. I already
Okay.
got the room reserved.
Thank you, sir. Without further ado, at 12:50, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Mark. Second. Thank you, Michael.
The silent Michael.
Yoo-hoo!
I'm not used to that, Michael. Get better.
And I think it's been a great